Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Entertainment Headquarters, and welcome to another review. And this particular review, I've been very excited to do. I've been very much excited for the build up to this particular film, and it's because I was a huge fan of the very first movie that came out way back in the early 2000s, and so on. And Danny Boyle and Alex Garland created one of the best British horror films that we've ever had. And it's now, continuing to grab audiences. And this particular entry is the next installment and the next story to be told within this amazing, dark, grounded, and what feels very real apocalyptic world. And I'm talking about 28 Years Later, which, very, much when the trailer dropped early last year, from that amazing introduction within the trailer to the clips that were shown, I immediately got excited and thought to myself, whoa, what's Danny Boyle and Alex Garland come up with, and where they're taken with. And in many ways, it's not the film I was expecting it to be, but it is also a film that I can generally see when I left theaters and seen it, I was pleasantly surprised. The critics have been praising this, the audiences have been mixed, and I can understand why the general audience might have mixed feelings on this. But let's have a quick recap. So, first and foremost, before we do that, 28 Years Later is a 2025 post-apocalyptic coming-of-age horror film produced and directed by Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland, the third installment in the 28 Days Later film series, following 28 Days Later and, of course, 28 Weeks Later. It stars Jodie Comer, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, and Alfie Williams in his feature film debut, and Ralph Fiennes. So that's who's in your cast, and let's have a quick recap. So the first movie in this, weapons biology lab near London, the rage virus gets released. It then goes across the whole of the UK. And you have this one character, Jim, that wakes up in hospital after some bike and car, collision. And boom, we have our first outing with the rage virus. Cut to 28 weeks later, the first, insertion of the rage virus was wiped out. It's then brought back after, events that transpire. And then the last thing we saw, boom, with the second epidemic, is it made its way to France. And everyone just assumed when it made its way to France, 28 months later, I'm assuming people were hoping to get, was going to be based in France and continental Europe. But that isn't the case. And in many ways, as much as I'm kind of disappointed, I'm also kind of pleasantly surprised with the direction that they decided to go with. So 28 Years Later is, for me, a great choice because, of course, there was distribution, disputes with Sony and so forth for the rights of the franchise. Also, of course, Danny Boyle and Alec Garland had a bit of a fallout. Many years have passed. They've now come back together, thank God, and solve their problems. And so the timing of it doing 28 months later compared to when the last film came out, it just makes sense that, they've skipped and came up with this idea for 28 years later, which is going to be a film trilogy. And it's, like I said earlier, it's not the film I was expecting it to be. And I was pleasantly surprised by that and the direction they did go in. So the story basically is you have this, like I mentioned, Europe has now wiped out the virus. Somehow Europe was able to pull it back, and the virus has now been contained in the island of Great Britain. It's now separated from the rest of the world. Great Britain is completely cut off, completely quarantined, and you have the navies of Europe, I'm assuming, and maybe parts of America are circling, the Isles of Britain to make sure nothing gets out, nothing goes in. And up north, the northeast of the country, there is a small island community on the Farne Islands, which is not far from where I live. So it was really nice to see a lot of scenery and a lot of where I live being featured in this movie. Absolutely blew us away. I recognise quite a bit within the confines of this film. And what I really, really enjoyed is you have this cut-off island community there's a causeway that links to the mainland, and when the tide comes in, it's totally cut off from the mainland. When the tide goes out, there's like a small causeway which gives them a small walkway onto the mainland. And you have Aaron Taylor-Johnson's character, who is Jamie, who has a young son, about 12-year-old, called Spike. He is played by Alfie Williams, who is a local lad from, my area, which was pleasant to see. And basically he decides, it's time for him to experience the world beyond this confined community, to give him a taste of what they face every day and the real life threat on the mainland. So he takes him, I guess, like on a little expedition, like a hunting expedition, and he goes out on the mainland and experiences his first taste of the rage virus and the people infected by it. You also have his mother. This is Jodie Comer, who plays his mother, who has a mysterious illness, who, throughout the course of the movie, you generally see her start to kind of deteriorate throughout the confines of the movie. So the great thing I loved about this aspect of the plot of this coming of age story is I love the direction, how, because Great Britain is cut off from the rest of the world, there's no communication, there's no technology, there's no power. They've kind of had to go back to the medieval times. That they kill things with bow and arrows. They have like wooden fences and giant wooden guard posts, watchtowers around this community that is separating itself from everywhere else. And they basically have become back in time to the medieval times. And you actually see throughout the course of the film, you see little footages of back in the day when you had people in the on horseback in the armor with swords and shields, and they feature a lot of little cutaway moments where you see the people with sword fighting defending themselves like they did in the medieval times. And I loved those elements of the film. I thought it was a real change to what we had seen before, which was very much based in London, felt nitty gritty, felt real, though it felt grounded. And then the second film was all about quarantine in London again and like the military, where this is taking its place up in the northeast of England in all this amazing scenic areas. And it just looks beautiful to the eye and beautiful to look at. And Spike, of course, just not prepared to see what's going on within this world that is before him. And just as people have had to adapt and to learn, to live this way in this new infected world that is upon them, 28 years have passed and the rage virus has evolved. People have, who are affected. There are different types of rage-infected people. You have what are called the crawlers, who were like these infected people that would crawl across the floor and they would eat maggots and bugs off the floor. And hate to say it, the majority of the crawler infected were overweight people. So they literally were crawling across the floor because they were overweight and they eating bugs and maggots. Then you have what I call the tracer infected, who are the ones that we've seen throughout the past 2 movies that just come running at you with the red eyes. And if they catch you, if they don't bite you, scratch you, they'll vomit that red bloody liquid out of the mouths, which will infect you and you go, turn into them. But the biggest surprise out of all of this was the new alpha infected individuals. Now, the alpha infected individuals is absolutely terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. So basically, where the rage virus, when it affects you, it turns you into like these crazy, rage-filled individuals that will just run at you, attack you, bite you, chomp at you, kill you. And they're like normal people. There are certain people, if they get affected by the rage virus, it's like a steroid. And it turns you into these bulky, powerful, like smarter, faster, stronger versions of the normal rage people. Like, if you look at this guy, he's absolutely gigantic. And that is Ralph Fiennes' character, who plays a big part in this movie later on. So basically, after the initial hunt with Spike and Jamie, and they make their way back to the island sanctuary, Spike notices his mother's deteriorating, and one of the locals, there's these fires that you can see in the distance. One of the locals then, tells Spike that those fires belong to this mysterious character who, they are scared. They find him scary. They find him peculiar. They find him like, there's just something odd about this individual who is supposed to be a doctor in this area on the mainland that they can see from their island. And basically what ends up happening, and once Spike gets told this person is a doctor, he decides to go on a campaign on his own to take his mother to the mainland to find out what this mysterious illness is. And as they head onto the mainland, just the two of them, things kind of get more and more dangerous. They bump into other infected individuals. They bump into this other character who I thought was brilliant. I really enjoyed this character. He is part of a boat from Sweden, like one of the Sweden Navy boats that sinks. And when it sinks, him and his men end up on the mainland, and they end up having to face off against the infected. And he's not in, his character, one thing I loved about his character is he brought humor to the story. Now, the one thing I will say about the 28 Days franchise, because of how it's filmed. It was filmed, back in the day on just normal mobile phone cameras. It was filmed on not, the highly, digitalized cameras. And because of that, it gave this franchise a grounded, nitty gritty, real look and feel about it. And it feels like the real world. It feels like this could actually really happen. And because it was so nitty gritty and the way it was filmed and brought together, there wasn't much humor in the past two movies. It was always quite serious. There was people that had hope or were trying to have hope in a terrible situation. But 9 times out of 10, the world was against them. But in this particular film, this character brings some humour because, like we say, the world is cut off. They don't know what's going on outside, and this guy's walking around with the most high-tech mobile phone going, and Spike is just completely like ignoring him when he's talking about things going on in the real world because he has no clue about anything beyond Great Britain. And it just makes for great humour, and it really, really worked well. As the plot progresses, you find out things that are going on with Spike's mother. You were also introduced to another infected who is heavily pregnant, who gives birth to an uninfected baby. And that takes the plot onto a different direction. But overall, this was not the movie I was expecting it to be, but it wasn't, for me, a disappointment. I like how they've kind of turned things back into the medieval times. I like how it took, we're out of London and took up north, and we got to see all the scenery, all of the great, countryside of the UK, especially near my hometown. And I loved how the plot focused on this one character, Spike, who literally, he's coming of age, he's grown up, he's starting to learn about the world, but he also is somebody who has such a big heart that all he wants to do is save or protect his mother from whatever's going on with her. And that, for me, is what gravitated to me about the story and about the plot and about the character of Spike. He really was the character that you gravitate to. And normally when you hear young kid actors are going to be in films, you kind of roll your eyes, but he did not make me roll my eyes. He really pulled this role off well. Alfie Williams did a fantastic job. The way this thing was filmed, it's very much like how Danny Boyle did the previous films, how he used technology to the best of his ability. As you can see on that rig, there's nothing but iPhones filming this particular scene from every angle going. That is one of the alpha infected. And so he used different types of camera angles, different types of filmography to really try to keep this movie as grounded as possible. He really tried to, make this world look real, feel real, look real. The threats are still there. The world is not as it was before, and you really get a real great feel of that. And it really pulled me in. The positives, like I say, are not just Alfie Williams or the amazing cinematography. I like the direction of the story. I thought that the third movie was going to be like an all-out war. Something, we've seen in many zombie movies where it starts off slow, like, Night of the Living Dead or, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, how it starts off slow in one place, like the cabin, then it went to a shopping mall, and then it basically took over the world, and there was like cities, being totally invaded. And as the last movie of the 28 Days franchise was going, with them being in Paris, I thought that's the direction that we're heading in. That's probably the direction, if they made 28 months later, might have went in, but obviously because of the time that is surpassed, and because of probably, you know, the conversations with Danny Boyle and Alex Garland, they probably thought, you know, enough time has passed, we can't really go backwards. In the future, they may potentially do a 28 months later side sequel, which we've seen films do, where they've done a film, done a sequel, done a prequel, and then they have a film somewhere in the side of all of that, and it becomes a side sequel. And this is a planned trilogy. And for the first part of a planned trilogy, I personally think it's worked well, because it's got me intrigued. It's got my interest, because it, like I say, it wasn't the film I was expecting it to be in terms of the direction they've went in. But I think for me, it's got me more interested because of the direction they've gone in, because of it just being this isolated island, Great Britain, and you've got just the infected evolving and growing and doing their thing, and then you've got these small communities all over, a bit like Mad Max, with different communities and different little sheltered cities, or Walking Dead. You know, it's definitely been influenced by stuff like that. Me negatives. Let's talk about me negatives. Me negatives would actually have to be Aaron Taylor Johnson, because after they have quite a strong, you know, introduction to his character Jamie, and we see how he's like trying to be very tough on Spike, we do see something go on with him on the island which really pissed me off. You don't really get much of this character beyond that point. And for me, he did an okay job. I'm not saying he was terrible, but it was just okay. But I think it was deliberately planted that way for him to have some sort of continuing arc in the next two movies. So you have 28 years later, The Bone Temple, which is coming out next January, and then it's being confirmed that Danny Boyle is going to be doing the third film. So he's taking a break from this, then going back to it. So I generally think the character of Jamie will have a bigger arc in the next two movies. It's also been revealed that Cillian Murphy will also be returning at some point as Jim, the character that started it all in 28 Days Later. So he was one of my negatives. The other negative I would say is, I don't know if this would be enough to keep people interested. I don't know, because the critics were very praising this film, but the general audiences were mixed, and I think a lot of people, like I said, were expecting a completely different movie. And because it's not the movie that people expected, it makes me think, will they turn in for the next two? I would like to think they will. Because people, I think, were expecting, with the end of 28 Weeks Later being set in Paris, in the invasion, you know, not invasion, well, yes, invasion, infection spreading, that it was going to be, you know, heading into Europe and taking it around the world and being bigger, badder than what we had seen. But that's not what we got. We've got this very grounded, more serious, coming of age story wrapped in this apocalyptic world with these infected rage people. And I generally think Spike's story has just begun, and we're definitely going to be following his journey through the course of the rest of the franchise and trilogy. So the pacing of this movie, I don't know if a lot of people enjoy it. I think the fact that it's not action heavy, a lot of people will not like it. and they could be seen as negatives. My negative is Aaron Taylor Johnson. I just felt like he could have done more. Or I felt as if his performance was okay, but it's not one of the best I've seen him do. It's way better than Kraven the Hunter. Gore in horror. There's plenty of gore, there's plenty of horror when the elements strike. And the great thing I loved about the gore and the horror, I think a majority of it was practical. I think there was very little CGI, and if there is CGI, it's very hard to tell it's CGI. I think the gore, when it comes to the Alpha truly terrifying. How he kills people, what he does to people when he grabs them, it's pretty intense. It's pretty intense and it's pretty horrific what he does when he kills people. And there is one or two jump scares that I did jump at. So they're me two negatives though. The Aaron Taylor Johnson, the pacing of the movie, I think people might not enjoy, and I think the fact it's not overly heavy in action. The positives, Alfie Williams, amazing. The cinematography, amazing. The overall story, it's the first chapter of the trilogy. I really have enjoyed the direction they take in the franchise. Really enjoyed it. The fact that it's filmed near my hometown, and I've seen a lot of things in this that I recognize, like this blew me away. This is the Angel of the North, which is literally 15 minutes up the road from where I'm sitting. And literally there is a scene that features the statue, the Angel of the North, and I truly was blown away. This particular scene with Alfie and Spike and Jamie, where they're running from the Alpha, that's kind of followed them to the beach, and they just are trying to get across the causeway before the tide gets too deep. That scene was one of the best scenes in the film. I really enjoyed it. When it comes to 28 years, the franchise, it's a franchise that has slowly grown on me. At the beginning, when I first seen the first one, I didn't know if I liked it. I didn't like it, but the more I watched it a couple of more times, I realised how grounded it was, how real it felt, how horrific it was. Now, if there was a apocalyptic event like that, like a rage virus or a zombie apocalypse, I feel as this is how it would be. I feel as this is how it would be. I feel as this is more real, this is more grounded. And that's what I like about it. That's why I think I gravitate towards it, because it feels very real and authentic, and you really feel for the characters. It's not over the top. It's not like too, crazy. There is horror elements, the shocks, the scares. And for me, that's what makes this franchise a want to watch. So if I'm going to rate 28 years later, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Because I think 8 out of 10 is a fair rating. Once again, positives. Alfie Williams' performance as Spike, brilliant. Cinematography, the scenery, how it captures the northeast of England, brilliant. The overall story and the direction that they've taken the franchise, I think, is different to what I was expecting, but I really enjoyed it. My negatives, unfortunately, I think Aaron Taylor Johnson, the direction his character went in, I was kind of pissed off. and the pacing of the movie, I don't know if people are going to like. And unlike me, who I love the direction of that they're taking this franchise in, I don't know if people are going to like it, because I think they were expecting all-out infected versus military war. And I'm looking forward to the next entry, the Bone Temple. 28 years later, the Bone Temple, which is due out in January. But yeah, amazing. And there's one other thing I need to mention before I wrap things up. There was one other particular scene that really got to us between the mother and Spike when they go visit the doctor, and something's explained to Spike, and something happens between him and his mother, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. So emotionally, this film grabbed me in a way that the other two did in many ways, but this film, grabbed me in a way that I didn't think I was going to. At the end of the day, it's a coming of age story about a young man that's making his way in this really tough, apocalyptic world, but he also is a young boy becoming a man that has nothing but absolute love for his mother and just wants to be there for her and help her with whatever's going on with her. And for me, that is what this is about. It's about a coming of age story with this young boy becoming a man, and a young, boy who just has nothing but love for his mother. And they're things I took away from this particular film as well. But yes, 8 out of 10 for me. Love the direction of 28 years later. Looking forward to chapter 2, the Bone Temple. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of 28 years later. Are you one of the ones that are divided, who didn't like the story, didn't like the direction, unhappy, think it was the worst film of the year like some people are saying? Or are you like me, pleasantly surprised that it wasn't the film that you expected it to be, but it turned out to be something that you enjoyed? Until next time, keep loving your movies, keep on loving all things entertainment, and I'll catch us all at the next one.